be like style boiling.
So I do that.
You gotta think like
We are. How was the spring break?
great.
Great. If we thought out about homework that's coming, that is now, what is it, 5?
Yeah.
Who looked at homework 5? Any progress? Yes. How much progress?
Come on.
Oh yeah? Done other book? Very good. Well, so, how much more machine learning we have to do this term?
Very little, right? Like almost nothing.
Let's see. Today is March, what? 12, right? And we have about how many weeks to go?
4, 6.
5, I think, right? You guys gonna have an exam, right? Yeah, in this class. We're gonna have an exam. So you have, this is the 5th homework. I think you're gonna have 7 homeworks altogether. So we have to finish this one about a week or so, you know, more or less. And then there'll be 2 more homeworks. And then you have an exam. I don't know how much the percentage the exam is gonna be. Typically it's like 35% of the grade, but that may go back and forth depending on what the exam is and how you guys do. The exam is gonna be like a live coding session. Like you go to the exam, it's like, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. You get 2 or 3 problems that are coding problems, like the homework problem. You can expect the same kind of problem like in the homework. Hey, I have this data set, I have an algorithm, I'm running it, I'm getting a result, or I'm not running it. How should I fix it? Or the problem might say, apply regularization, or it might say, reduce the dimensionality, or figure out why it's not working. So you should expect a typical machine learning exercise that's not theoretical. So the exam will not say prove anything, there'll be no math problem in the exam. But there will be questions like that ask you to figure out the machine learning part of things. Like if I have this data set and I run this decision tree, why is it that this decision tree doesn't do the job? Maybe you have to figure that out. So you need some time to code. You need a machine to code. You have to bring your own laptop. There will not be computational intensive issues. So you should not expect a problem that just running the stuff or trying it out is going to take an hour. That won't be the case. Stuff will run reasonably fast. And that will be in a lab with outlets so you guys can have power to your computers. This kind of exam, the very best students who are on the right track from the beginning and just try the right things, there will be no tricky things. So if it's a deep decision tree, the reason might be overfitting, for example, which is the first thing that comes to mind when you have to fix it. How do you fix a decision tree that overfits, right? So I think this can be done easily in 2 hours if you're on the right track from the beginning, and if you're not, it might take 5 hours. That's what you should expect for an exam. I didn't schedule it yet. It will be after all the classes ends. But my interest here is to have it before all the other exams are. So if the exam week is April 20 to 27, something like that, you're probably going to do this one before the exam week because it's an exam that needs to be scheduled separately. And then if you have another course, then that will be after this one. All right. So now, you guys cannot do this homework, the whole homework, because I didn't tell you everything about it, right? Let's look at the homework. I have it here. I will put it on. I'll use my projector later, but for now, I have the homework here. By the way, I'm grading your math problems. Very soon we're going to have some grades on those. So there's the Adabus problems, decision stumps. We all know that. More data sets for Adabus. Active learning. That's what we started talking about. So today we're going to focus primarily on homework 5. So one thing is active learning. We started this. We need to finish it up so you guys can do the problem. What else we have here? Error correcting output codes. I don't think we talked about this at all, right? Anybody knows what that is? Nobody. Good. Then we have gradient boosted trees for regressions. We talked about this. But then the next problem, graduate only problem, talks about something called VC dimension. That's also new, right? We didn't talk about VC dimension at all. So we need to worry about this. There is a question with bagging here that we're gonna talk very, very briefly. I have no interest at all in bagging. It's just for historical purposes, so you guys know what that is. It's a very, at some point it was complicated, but now we're gonna do the simple thing, which is when your homework. It's gonna take me 3 minutes to figure that out. And then the last thing I want to do, which is not really homework 5, is talk more about boosting and ranking. Let's see how much time we have to do that. So that's kind of our plan here for today. Let's start with active learning, which is the stuff that we started talking last time. And we said what? In one simple shot, what is active learning? I'm going to put it here as an algorithm, active learning. That's pretty much what we did the last 5 minutes of the last lecture. We're saying start with, say, 10%. So we have a train set with unlabeled data, say large train set. The idea in here being it's easy to collect data that's not labeled, like images or emails, right? So easy to get a bunch of web documents, stuff like that. But it's typically expensive to label them correctly, and that can become very expensive if data is domain specific. So anybody can look at an image and decide a simple thing, is a tiger in this picture or not. But the more images get complicated, so there's CT scans. Not many people can look at a CT scan and figure out what's going on, like a medical domain. Also, it's a large document, or there's a very subtle political notion in a text document. Labeling stuff is showing to be very expensive and domain specific, very time consuming, and requires expertise that only few people have. And for us that's important because having labeled data is how supervised machine learning works. By the way, I'm going to make a small parenthesis here. You're aware of CAPTCHAs, right? CAPTCHAs are a very smart, very ingenious way to get labels without paying for them. Right? So it is true that it serves as a security mechanism, and that part, which I'm not going to get into, it's a chicken and egg kind of problem with the security mechanism. The more CAPTCHA advances, the more the algorithms try to beat CAPTCHA advance too, and the more CAPTCHA itself is more difficult, right? The latest CAPTCHA, if you've seen them, it's kind of hard for a human to do that, right? It's like becoming useless. If a human can do it, then what's the point? Anyway, apart from that, I think it's kind of clear how you can use CAPTCHA to actually collect labels for, say, text or translations or images. That's hard to get, expensive, and you don't pay because as a security mechanism, you put some sort of half security, half labeling CAPTCHA. People write down the answers, getting logged in or whatever the CAPTCHA is for, and as a result of that, you not only have the security mechanism, but also a way of collecting labels. Okay, so say we start with some 10% random label data. And then we train some machine learning algorithm. We then test on unlabeled data. So So where am I in here? I got some labeled data, very few, right? I train a machine learning algorithm, say it's a regression line or some perceptron that separates the data. And now I can evaluate my perceptron on all the other data points which are not labeled. It's still in the training set. This whole thing is part of the training set. And we say here label few points, say about 5% or 3%, that are closest to separation. This is a very vague term here, separation decision of my classifier. So this separation could mean different things for different algorithms. If it's a line, it's the closest to the line. But if it's a generative model with probabilities, what would be the closest to separation if my algorithm processes probabilities to say be black or white? What would be?
Low probability.
Probably what?
High probability.
High probability would be close to the decision surface or far away?
Low probability very close to the decision surface.
Well, let's think about that. So suppose I have black and white, and I'm predicting probability of be black. If it's 100% to be black, it comes out on the black side, kind of far away, right, for sure. If it's 100% to be black, so if it's 100% it's the black side, if it's 0% means what? I'm pretty sure it's a white, quite clear.
You want roughly equivalent probabilities for both, right?
So the most confusing will be a probability of about 50%. Right? So separation means something for a line, so that may be for a line is close to the line. For probabilities, it's close to 50% probability of being black and white. So this is, or we can say in general, it's the most, it's hard to predict or low confidence. All these notions are the same thing. That's where the classifier is not sure whether it's a plus, black or white. Different classifiers will have different notions of not sure. We'll see later on in this class that we can call this for certain classifiers low margins. That's a technical term that's going to be important 2 weeks from now. And then, so I pick what points? Maybe this point is close, and maybe this point right here is close. Right? And I'm going to label them. Label them, I'm going to pay somebody to figure out whether those are pluses and minuses. And then I do what? I start back from the train the machine learning algorithm. So once I have, say, 10% plus 3%, 13%, I have a larger training set. I retrain my algorithm. There's some algorithms for which I don't have to retrain from scratch. I can just update my algorithm a little bit, maybe. Like a gradient descent-based algorithm. At some point, maybe I can incorporate more data. Or I can retrain from scratch. And I can loop this, so I get, once I retrain my classifier, I can expect my line, say here, to change a little bit, to be close to this one, but not exactly that one. Then I pick another 3% and keep doing that. That's what you have to do for the homework for one of the problems. So the question here is, how does this compare to, in the end, I get the same budget, say I can label 1,000 images or 1,000 data points. I could label them initially randomly, say pick 1,000 images and label them, and I have a supervised training set now. Or I can do it little by little with this mechanism, 3%, 3%, 3%, advancing, always picking points that are closer to the separation surface. That's kind of like the hardest points for which the algorithm has a hard time. Is this buying me something? So within the same budget, say I can label 1,000 points, the idea would be to get a more accurate classifier. Within the same accuracy, say my purpose would be to reach 90% accuracy. What should I observe then? somebody else. So if there's two ways of thinking of budgeting problems. One way is to say I have a fixed budget. I can label 1,000 data points. Then I would expect active learning to do better, to have a higher accuracy for the same budget. So you can think about this and say, if this is my my budget, that's number of labeled data, and this is the accuracy or performance. I should observe some curve with my random. Say this is random pick label. The more I label data points, my algorithm is increasing in performance, and eventually probably is going to asymptote, because once it learns everything that's to learn, doesn't matter if I add more data to it or not. What should happen if I do, instead of randomly picking data, this is a some 5% of the data set, or 10%. This is 20%. It goes up to 30, 40, 50, 60% of the data set later. The active learning one, I should expect to get the same kind of accuracy, but for fewer labels. So I would expect the active learning plot to be jump up higher, right? Still gonna asymptote at some point, because it's just the best you can learn with this. The algorithm, the learning algorithm, please observe, is not changing. There is a generic fixed machine learning algorithm, like a line or a decision tree or a GDA or a support vector machine, whatever it is. That's not in play here. That's a fixed machine learning algorithm. The only thing that we're talking about is how to select data points for each to get labels. So this is the active learning selection of label data. Question?
So are you saying, since we're considering more relevant data points, the accuracy, we get good accuracy faster?
Right. That's what I'm saying. That's our goal here. Hands up who's with me. Let's just recap this. I have a fixed learning algorithm, whatever. Somebody is picking that, is running that. My only purpose here is to figure out what data to feed into it. And I have a large collection of data points, like 10,000 images or 100,000 images, but I can only pay for 1,000 of them to be labeled, because you really have to pay a person to look at the image and put a label down, right? Or judge documents or look at medical records, whatever the task is. The difference is, should I pick it at random, or should I just little by little go by the algorithm and select the most interesting points, right? This close to the line would be the interesting ones. So what I want to point out, that's something that you should know in general. These plots can be looked at either this way or the other way. You can reverse the axis. You can reverse the axis and do ask a different question. This is saying, for the same budget, say 20%, how much performance do I get if I pick the data random, versus how much performance do I get if I select it intelligently with active learning? If I flip this question, I can ask for a particular performance. This is, I don't know, 70% accuracy. How much data do I need if I pick it randomly? That's in here. How much data do I need if I pick it with active learning? So these kind of questions, which appear in a lot of optimization problems, like even when you build processors or something like this, you can ask the same question in two ways. If I have a fixed budget, how much do I get bang for the buck, so to speak, if I do it one way or the other way? The other question is not the fixed budget, but the fixed target or performance. I really want my CPU to have at least 2.8 frequency, or I really want my accuracy of the classifier to be at least 70%. right? How much effort do I have to put in to get to that point? This one saying I need to select maybe 30% of the data to get to that performance. This one saying I need to select maybe 8% of the data to get to that performance. So this is saying you need a smaller budget to obtain. Now, both ways are saying active learning, we need a smaller budget than the regular random sampling. But it depends whether you have a fixed budget and then you want to get the most out of it, or you want a fixed accuracy and then you want the least effort to get there.
So there you've written that we start with 10% of all trains.
That I picked. This is I made up.
But you said that it's randomly labeled. Now you're saying that you have budget, you're hiring somebody.
So there's a question of initialization. You don't want to start with just 2 labels.
Uh-huh.
You want to start with something more than, and initially you don't have a classifier, so you got to pick something at random. Right?
But we're paying someone to label data for us,
Right.
but it's not random then. So the first 5%, 3% of data is labeled by someone who we pay.
Yeah, but we select the data, which images at random.
Huh.
So the person, annotators, how they are called, or judges,
Uh-huh.
or mechanical Turks, or whoever, they label what data we select.
Oh, got it.
Right? So usually they pay by the image. For every image they judge, here's the amount of money. In some domain, like medical domain, they might be paid by the hour. A longer document might take more to evaluate than a shorter document. So there's other considerants here than the number of points themselves, but we're not going to get into those details. All right. So is this intuitively, what I want to do for 10 minutes or so is not go into theory, but create some intuition of why this is. So the first intuition, which I think we mentioned last time, is why would a point closer to, assuming this line is roughly okay, as in, even though I learn a line from 10% of the data, that classifier is still doing something, right? I mean, you notice this. Even if I use a smaller sample, I get a reasonable classifier. Say, for the spam-based data, the accuracy one can get is 95%. If I use very little spam, instead of 4,000 emails, I'm going to use 200 emails, or 400 emails, 10%. I'm not going to get 96% accuracy. I'm going to get 75 or 65, but decent, right? I mean, something. So assuming this line is kind of around the spot where it needs to be, but it's not very good, why is it better to select these points close to the line than to select some point here, which is now labeled, which I could label? Yes?
Knowing that a point that's very far away is positive or negative doesn't give you a lot of information about where the line should be, because no matter where the line is, it's going to want to separate the 2 classes. So if it's very far from the decision, you're not going to move it. Whereas the ones that are close to the line might affect where the line should be.
So that's close to what I have in mind. Again, assuming the line is roughly already in the correct spot. I mean, if this line is totally off, like random, and the right line is something like this, then this point might be quite useful. But that's assuming my first line here is complete junk, right? So assuming though the other way, that this is a reasonable line, this point is very likely to end up being a minus. And then it doesn't teach me that much if it's a minus, because I already knew with high confidence it's a minus. And what he's saying is that even if you say this is a minus, it is true that the regression loss will adapt, because it's a square loss, right? So it's going to account for this loss, but it won't be a large adaptation, right? You should think of a classifier, the more this is correct and far away from the decision surface, the more the line won't change, right? Because the more confidence I have on something being minus, which is truly minus, it means I don't need to change the line to account for that minus, right? On the other hand, if this comes up a plus, that might teach me a lot. If I'm willing to buy it, something very far away from a line ends up being a plus, means either my line is a junk line, so it's totally in the wrong position, or this is likely an outlier. Some person put the wrong, they say it's a tiger, but it's no tiger in the image or something like that, right? Because this line, if it's roughly in the correct position, cannot reasonably move this plus on the other side. Right? If this is not an unreasonable line, so the space is kind of in there, then what will it take to this line to include this plus on the other side and these minuses to the minus side? It will mean the line has to move all the way like this, which means the original line was not good at all. Right? So the story with faraway points, the confident points, is that if they're truly right, it means my original line is no good. And if they're wrong, like this is an outlier, I don't really want to learn from them anyway. How about the points in here? The points in here are the ones that might actually move the line a little bit in a better position, right? So suppose I find out this here, this point is a plus. I label that point and I say it's a plus. What would the line move? Where would it move? Move something like this, right? So you can see how I learned that's a plus. This is my line initially. Now it moves this way. Maybe this is a better line now. Of course, I'm doing this as an illustration. I'm not labeling one point at a time. I'm labeling, say, 3%. So in the spam-based data set, 3% is roughly 100 points at a time. Labeling 100 points closer to the line or to the surface, that means I have now a better chance to getting a more exact line. That's one intuition. The other intuition that I think it makes sense as an analogy and as a technical exercise is suppose I look at unidimensional data like numbers, and I have, this is the real axis, so this is from the minus infinity to plus infinity somewhere. So every data point here, it's a number. And there is a say a W, that's the threshold between minus and plus. So black and white, right? So I know there's a minus region here, and there's a plus region. This is not, my W is not necessarily 0. There's a red and blue, okay, regions. I know for sure there is some trade threshold where, you know, like for example, that happens a lot, you know, when you apply for some scholarship or when people apply for a bank loan application, something like that. There's an internal threshold that, you know, you get a credit score, right? That's public. Everybody can, you know, you can see your credit score, but you don't have access to the internal threshold of how the bank works. The person who decides what's the threshold that we give you a loan or not, they don't tell you that threshold. Some people would get the loan, some people would not get the loan based on credit score and history and whatever, right? But you just get notified, sorry, we couldn't offer you this loan or scholarship or whatever, or a job, right? Same thing. The recruiter will score you internally based on your skills, your exams, you know, your impression, blah, 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 CV. And at the end, you don't know, hey, my score was 925 and the threshold was 926. No, that's not going to happen. But I'm just saying, they only tell you sorry or yes, you hire, right? So suppose you want to find that threshold, whether you do a bank loan application or a scholarship or looking for a job. I'm this evil person who wants to find that threshold. And I use my students to find the threshold. So I send different students with different scores, right, to see which one gets the job and which one doesn't. And I'm trying to find where the threshold is, right? So let's imagine that sort of scenario where whatever, it's a bank application or job interview, it doesn't matter. There's a scoring function. Everybody gets a score. The scores we know. Every time I send a student to that job interview, I know the score he gets, and I know whether he's getting rejected or accepted. My job here is to find that threshold. Make sense? How do we do this? Very good, right? binary search, as opposed to I could just pick a random set of points, right? I could pick, hey, this. I can pick some uniform sampling distribution of scores, assuming again I know the scores of my students, right? And I say, send those guys to the interview. Some of them will get jobs here, and some of them will not get jobs. And now I have an area of error, right? Area of error is I know the minimum plus here, the least plus, it's got to be above the threshold because this guy got a job, and I know the last minus, that is the highest score that got rejected, is below the threshold, right? So this W, I know it's in this range, because the person with this score got rejected and the person with this score got accepted, W must be somewhere in here. That's exactly how binary search works, right? It looks at that interval, say, from where to where do I need to look now? Because I know I'm not looking in this side. Everybody in here got jobs. And I know I'm not looking this side. I only have to look into this side. So I can imagine this being a shrinking algorithm. I start with an interval from here to here. That's my search space. And then little by little, I reduce it to what it is. So, of course, binary search is going to pick the point in the middle here, right? Every time you have a search space, it's going to say pick the middle one. Why pick the middle one? What's the intuition of picking the middle one? Right, dividing the searching space in half. Can we make kind of that argument based on this? So I agree, in terms of shrinking the searching space, binary search is very efficient because it splits in half. Let's rephrase that argument. This is my current search space. If I pick in the middle and label this point, if it comes out a plus, my search goes here, right? And if it comes out a minus, my search moves in here. I'm guaranteed that at the end of one step of binary search to have only half of the search space to look for. But somebody say, wait a minute, what if I'm lucky? Lucky means I'm going to pick a point in here, which is say 3/4 to the right. So I know this is for sure a minus side, and I know this is for sure the plus side. The question is, where in here is the threshold that I need to find out? If I pick a point in the middle, I'm guaranteed that after the labeling, I'm left with half of the space. But what if I pick this point? I could be very lucky, and if this ends up being a
minus.
If this is a minus, my search space, it's only 1/4, right? That's even better than a half. Actually, it's double better, right? Because now instead of searching for a half, I'm looking into 1/4. That's good, right? Problem is, I'm not sure I'm going to be lucky. What if I'm unlucky, and this is a plus, and then my search space is 3/4. Not just that, because this is 3/4 into the right, what's more likely? It's more likely to be a plus or a minus, absent any other evidence, which is the unlucky case, right? So the issue here can be characterized with information theory, like coding, and say, how much information do you get by labeling this? An expectation, assuming a probability for being a plus higher than the probability of being a minus, and how much do you get being in the middle, and you get in the middle is better in terms of reducing the space. Right? Yes?
What if the random point you picked is actually like an outlier, and then say like that was a minus, and then the majority of points around it are actually plus?
Right, so what if I have mistakes?
Yeah.
So he's asking a noise question where there is a threshold and my points are not really minus, 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 plus, 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 plus. What if I have minus, 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 and some pluses here, and plus, 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 but also some minus between them? There's still presumably a threshold somewhere. How do I estimate that? So we cannot answer that question right now. we have to get into these noise models. And you have to allow for an error here, no matter what. Even if you label a lot of points, the fact that you can have pluses with minuses intercalated, you're never going to know for sure where the threshold is. In binary search, if we are allowed to ask a lot of questions, we're going to shrink the space down to any size we want. So we're going to become very sure where that threshold is. But if you allow noise, you're never going to be 100% sure, even if you ask a million questions. But there is an entire literature of how to do this. So we can get into this towards the end of the course into how to deal with noise. By the way, some people ask how to deal with missing features in Piazza. The missing features are not noise. Right? The fact that I don't have a value doesn't mean it's noise. Noise is usually a label problem. So we can't answer this because we need a noise theory and some probabilistic assumptions. But we can at least say this we cannot solve perfectly within some error. By error, I mean this is the uncertainty here, but it's not due to noise. I'm not talking about what he said, what if you have noise. I'm talking about uncertainty as in I don't know where my W is between the last minus and the first plus. That's my uncertainty error. So the more I ask questions, this uncertainty is going to go down, right? Like in binary search, it goes down by half. Before I move on, I want to redo this argument to chopping down in half, kind of as an analogy to this. Why pick the middle point again? Not by chopping argument, by where is if I say this is my uncertainty now, from here to here, is this uncertainty uniform? If somebody picks a random point here, would I have a belief of that point being plus or minus? Again, I don't know what the threshold is. This is my uncertainty range. So anything in there could be a mistake, no matter what, because I don't know where it is. But if somebody pick a point here, how would I feel about making a prediction? I feel, okay, I'm not sure. Again, I'm assuming no noise, so it's not a question of noise. If I know what the threshold is, then I can classify everything 100% accurate. But if somebody picks a point in here, I'll say, you know, I'm going to guess that's a minus. Am I sure? I'm not sure. But it's totally towards the minus side. Same thing from here, right? I'm going to say that's likely to be a plus. Where is my confidence, my uncertainty the highest? In the middle. That's the same argument as in here, right? These points, which I don't have labeled, I could guess with some high confidence that's a minus. This one here, that's a plus. Where I have low confidence? In the middle. So this principle of low confidence teaches me the most. Is the one that's being applied there. Okay, so actually I can make this argument with splitting the space in half also for the lines. If you think about it in here, I don't have this point. All these lines are valid, right? All the lines that are passing through here are valid lines. They separate the minuses with the pluses. This is my search space right here. I restricted the set of possible lines down to the set of these lines because those are the ones that are possible given my label points. So my search space now is which line out of those is the one that I need. I'm assuming no noise. I'm assuming there is a perfect line that classifies everything perfectly. Right? If I am to create a binary search analogy and say, I want to chop this search space in half. Right? So I have an uncertainty because I don't know which one of these lines is the one I'm looking for. If I label this point, am I chopping the space in half? No. So to look from an information perspective at this, how can I remove half of the lines in here? Right? I look at all this space. I think picking a point in the middle to label, whether it's a plus or a minus, it's going to take away half of the lines because half of those lines will be incorrect for that point, right? If this is a plus, then all these lines are here are incorrect. No, all these lines are correct. If this is a plus, all these lines are correct. And if this is a minus, all these lines in here are incorrect. Right? So if you think of a classifier search space, as after I have, so my train set, current train set is say 15%. My classifiers are all the functions f, those could be decision trees or lines, whatever the classifiers I have. This is the ML algorithm that has the property that f is correct on the train set, current train set. Right? This is all the lines that are correct for the data points I have right now. So how to select a new point? New point to label. I want either the point will end up being a plus or end up being minus, I don't know, but either way I want to chop the search space in half. So either way I want about, so this set, call them S, about half of this set to be incorrect. Be incorrect so that I can throw them out. Right? Once the point that I pick, whether it comes plus or minus, it's going to remove half of the lines out of the equation. These lines will not be possible anymore. That means, like in binary search, I'm chopping the space in half. Right? So a lot of the active learning papers, 1990s, were full of these kind of theories. I'm going to show you another one in a moment. We're concerned about the search space, and they quantify search spaces for decision trees, for naive Bayes, for regression, so on and so forth. How do we, like in binary search, chop this space in half? One more thing I have to say here. If I do binary search and I chop the space in half with every point, what kind of progress am I making? If every point chops in half, that's ideal, right? It doesn't happen like that in reality, but in theory. If every point chops in half, how is my progress here, accuracy versus budget? Right? If every point reduces my purchase in half, conceptually thinking, how fast do I get to the value that I'm looking for, this W? Exponentially fast, because my uncertainty reduces in half with every point, right? So if, say, I'm trying to reduce from an uncertainty of 100,000 to an uncertainty of 1, how many steps do I need to take? Well, the first step chopped the 100,000 in half, then chops again in half, chops in half, chops in half. That's clearly an exponential. I need only log base 2 of 100,000, like in binary search, to get down to 1. So you can see how picking the interesting points, this exponential reduction happens due to the ratio that's half, even if it's not exactly half, right? Suppose my chopping is not exactly 50-50, sometimes it's 60-40, it's still an exponential reduction. You see that in quicksort. If you remember quicksort, even though the point, the pivot doesn't end up in the middle all the time, unless it ends up really weird all the time, it's still an exponential reduction and you end up with n log n. What happens, so if I do active learning selection, look at binary search, I get the exponential progress. That's assuming there is a no noise classifier perfect, and assuming that my points don't, I can select points that chop the space roughly in half or roughly at a factor. What if I pick random points? If I look in here and say, I want a margin of epsilon, so the target between the high minus and the low plus, that is the uncertainty, right? Target uncertainty. I want to be epsilon. In other words, I can tolerate an error of epsilon in here. So I'm now in the mood of saying, I'm not asking for a fixed budget. I'm asking for a fixed performance or error or uncertainty. How much data do I need? So if I want a fixed error here and I sample uniformly, how many data points do I need to sample? That's a statistical question, nothing to do with machine learning, because the sampling is uniform. I want to sample points in such a way that the difference between the last plus and the first minus, or the highest minus and the last plus, to be around epsilon. How many points do I need to sample? Again, they're uniformly sampled. So you cannot hope to get a high concentration around W and a low concentration outside, because that's being very lucky. You just sample points, they're going to end up like kind of uniformly distributed. How many points do I need to sample so that this difference here, this difference is actually kind of the difference between any two consecutive points, because uniform sampling will give uniform kind of distances on expectation between the points, right? So if I want this to be epsilon, how many points do I need?
1 over epsilon.
1 over epsilon. This is the expectation of, right? You can easily do this as an exercise, statistical exercise on expectation. If you have an interval, sample 1 over epsilon points, say epsilon is 0.01, you need to sample 100 points to obtain that kind of expected rate difference between them, right? You can see this. This is my interval from 0 to 100. If I want the average distance between points to be 1, and I have from 0 to 100, how many points do I need to sample? The range divided by that 1, it's 100 points, right? Well, how about in here? If I make exponential progress and I binary search, right? And I want the remaining search space to be epsilon, same target. How many chops do I need to do?
7.
Log base 2 epsilon.
Log base 2 or
Of 1 over epsilon.
1 over epsilon. It's like binary search, right? Every chop reduces the uncertainty, so to get to that epsilon target, I need 1 over epsilon. So this would be roughly 1 over epsilon. We call it in computer science, you know, big O notation or theta notation. Yes?
But here, it's 1 over epsilon. Epsilon would be expressed as a ratio between the total range and the amount you want. Otherwise, it couldn't be 1, it would have to be the whole range, right?
Yeah. So it is the same problem where I search from 0 to 1 and I need a 0.01 epsilon, as I search from 0 to 1,000,000 and I'm looking for an epsilon of 100. It's just a scaling issue, right? So epsilon is a proportion.
And then with theta notation, it doesn't matter anyway.
Right. This theta is like the big O notation theta is right on the part of. So this is a fundamental problem in not just machine learning, into this algorithmic kind of machine learning view, because machine learning there's a lot of math, but here we concentrate more on the applicability of it. You're going to run this problem, you're going to pick the points in the middle, see what you can do with them. That's all fine. But I want you to understand this concept. Why is this effectively binary search on the classifier space and this difference? Uniform sampling, it's linear in the error that you want, or 1 over error. Active learning, as long as it works, because you might get stuck. Maybe there is no point close to the line and you can't select more points right there. But as long as it works, you can expect an exponential progress. So clearly for a fixed target, I can get that accuracy much faster if I pick the point intelligently than if I pick them at random.
So my question is about active learning in general. So from the beginning of the class, we said that labeling data is a very expensive operation. So it's like very common that we are able to label some small part of the data and use active learning to make use of whole data. So is this algorithm being actively used, or does it have some unrealistic assumptions, or like, but I mean, how common is it used in real life?
I don't know if I give you this analogy or not last time. Maybe I did. You get a phone call from your bank, and it says, we detected and we block your card. Sorry, we detected unusual activity, right, on your card. What's up? That unusual activity, where is it?
Far from the line, far from the separating line.
Right, so this is the regular use of the cards, you know, going to Stop and Shop around my house kind of thing, where I always use my card, and this is, you know, paying in Thailand for you know, some, who knows what kind of, you know, going hunting and shooting elephants. So out of a sudden, this guy who lives in Boston and does shopping around, boom, pays for hunting in the other side of the world. It's in here, right? The bank calls you not to label data necessarily, right? Because they call you, it's a problem with credit card. They want to know if it's fraud or not. You can tell them whether that's a fraud or it's not a fraud. But would they learn a lot from this if this is a fraud? They have a machine learning algorithm, right? I mean, for sure they have a machine learning algorithm. They look at all the transaction locations, amounts, how much you income, how much you spend. They look at your history, and this pops up as a, you know, something unusual. Would they learn something from here? Again, my question is, you call them and tell them, hey, that's not me, there's a fraud. Would their algorithm change at all? No. But if you tell them in here, yeah, that's me, I went hunting, would the algorithm change at all? I don't think so. I think if somebody like you, like me, goes next week in Thailand and shoots elephants and pay for that, it's going to immediately pop up as a red flag. In the other sense, the algorithm will have no way to learn that this person who only spends money around, out of a sudden takes a trip and pays for something really out of, you know, ordinary. It's not learnable from this point. But if it's, what kind of transaction will be something that their algorithm learns about? So what would be something in the middle?
Like same location, same amount, like similar amount.
That's in here. If I do my regular shopping and I spend my money like I always did, and I get the same income and I spend the same amount, the algorithm will place it here. That's valid, right? This guy is always go to the same Stop and Shop. He always buys the same bread and the same butter and the same fish, and he always spends the same amount of money. It's unlikely out of a sudden that's a fraud, right? So what would be something that will actually change the bank algorithm for detecting this?
Hunting in Boston.
Okay.
Well, if lots of people start doing it, then they would notice it as a pattern, maybe.
Right. If it's learnable, if there is a reason that people who have a certain behavior in the past, out of a sudden, a lot of them start doing the same thing, which can happen, right? There's an underlying reason that's not explicit yet, for which everybody, Stop and Shop is bankrupt, so everybody who do groceries and Stop and Shop all of a sudden do it at Market Basket, for example. But what would be, let's rephrase your example in a more interesting way. I'm doing grocery shopping, but not in Boston area. I'm still buying what I buy, but it's, you know, I don't know, 10 miles away. So that's the kind of thing that would be like, okay, he's buying the same thing that he bought before, but he's not in Boston. Is that a case of somebody stealing his credit card and doing the same groceries? Or is this guy who moved, or who's, you know, has a vacation for a week or has a trip or something and is buying the same thing? So that would be something that may be changing the algorithm. What's another example of this? So that's one. When is the feedback coming in that's related to changing the machine algorithms, how they work. Yes.
If you were an e-commerce company and you had most people, you had like a certain persona that always bought certain things, and then there was a new trend, and everyone of that persona started buying this new item, that would teach them.
Right, right. That's changing the algorithm, but it's the same thing as saying everybody who goes to the shop and stop and shop all of a sudden just do different groceries. That's the kind of example. There's a shift in the everybody's behavior for some underlying reason. The FDA says this drug causes cancer. Nobody's going to buy it anymore, right? I want more something like soft details. I want to follow your example. So you are Amazon, right? You know everything about everybody. That's not a good thing, but you know everything about everybody. So what would be the kind of example that's way here? Well, that's Virgil, who bought that, I don't know, dishwasher powder every single week. He's buying it again, right? What would be an example here?
Buying an elephant.
Buying an elephant, right, out of a sudden. Here's the guy who spends $300,000 on an elephant, right? What would be an example here?
Buying a bread.
Buying what?
Bread, water, and then
Is that the same thing I always buy?
buying another dish.
Another brand.
Buying something that is not unusual in itself, but unusual for me, right? So I'm the guy who always bought from Amazon, you know, certain things, and out of a sudden I'm spending more money and on an item that I don't usually buy, but other people do buy. So it's reasonable to assume that, you know, something happened in my house and I need a certain thing, but I never bought that sort of appliance or that sort of thing. That's something that the algorithm will be like, I'm not sure. It could be that guy who has a broken dishwasher who's looking for a dishwasher, or it could be fraud. Somebody took his credit card and is buying something expensive from Amazon. That's where they will learn the most. So now, of course, from machine learning perspective, as a parenthesis, is it possible for Amazon to learn something here? Can my history, is my history rich enough in features to make that sort of prediction? Right? Amazon knows what I bought and might know also what movies I watch on Amazon Prime. Might also know something about my income. Why is that? Because what? Because they know something with a Prime membership and they know how much money I'm spending overall. So they have this information. Can they predict, hey, a dishwasher bought out of a sudden, it's reasonable. So I may need to ask the question and change my classifier a little bit versus not ask that question. I think it depends on how rich the history is, how many features I have to relate that purchase with a set of features. All right? Well, so we can try to come up with more examples like this.
Like, my question was, in real life, how common we use active learning? Like Google, Facebook, blah, blah, how active they are at using these?
All the companies that collect feedback, like clicks, Google collects a lot of clicking feedback, right? They have to make a decision how to act on the feedback. Whether it's an outlier feedback, ignore it. Whether it's likely to be fraud, close the credit card. Or whether it's likely to incorporate that feedback in their algorithms. So that happens for all Facebook, Amazon, Google, all big companies. Netflix, there's a huge amount of feedback, right, in rating movies and all that. Obviously, some of it is junk. People rate things at random for the wrong reason, right? You are Netflix now. You try to improve your recommendation algorithm. What feedback is useful? This is a very, you might get interview questions like this or even have a job like this. A lot of this feedback in industry, it's not a matter of how to put it into the machine learning algorithms, but a matter of selecting what is useful and what is not useful. Spotify and so on and so forth. So I think that happens all the time, and companies that have a lot of feedback have this problem not collecting data, but which data is actually useful for them. Google, I know people working at Google that have the job of trying things out intelligently, like how do you change ads bidding mechanism for Google in a way that before you put it in production, you can estimate the revenue change. So there's a lot of money passing through these hands, billions of dollars. they cannot try too many things because it takes time and effort to try it. But then the risk of putting something in production is risk of changing revenues by billions of dollars. So their question is kind of a safety. What feedback do I use to make sure I'm not damaging the revenue? So a lot of successful companies have more of a problem of damaging their existing stuff. How often, Facebook introduces a feature and then they discover, oh, what's better, take it out. There's a risk when you are very successful of introducing something that breaks the successful part. Okay, so that's what I have to say about active learning. There's a lot of interesting theoretical papers from about 30 years ago about this. But that's what you have to do. Let me move on to Vcdim, which for now, it's going to be just a geometry exercise.
Did you talk about ECOC?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Vcdim of classifier F. So, what we're going to do now is give a definition, and this is a pure geometry for you for this homework. But theoretically speaking, this is a foundation of entire machine learning from 30 years ago, which is called pack learning, probabilistic, approximately correct machine learning. So that's how the theory went back then, and there's something called risk minimization. And before powerful statistical and linear algebra methods and variational inference, the stuff with taking derivatives and moving the direction of the differential, so to speak, neural networks came along heavy after that. Before that, a lot of the theory was based on this particular foundation. So here's how it works. I have a classifier. Now, as opposed to here, the classifier is given, it's fixed. So let's just say my classifier F, for an example, is a circle, classifier class. So I have a bunch of, it's a circle, the inside is a plus, the outside is a minus. That's my classifier. I could have a line, some side is a plus, some side is a minus. Right? I could have being a rectangle, inside being a plus and outside being a minus. Or I can say you have a rectangle, but you can choose this is plus minus, this is minus plus. So you can choose, like or in here, you can have a circle that you can choose whether the inside is positive or negative or not. So it's not a fixed, the inside is positive. You can also choose which side is positive and which side is negative. Right, so I can have this family of classifiers. And then I have S, a set of points fixed positions, that is features. Right? Because the way you look at points, I tell you they're fixed. That means their x1 and x2 are not moving. That's a fixed set of points. And I have 2 to the size of S possible labeling. Right? I can take these points and map each one of them binary labeling. In how many ways can I make them be pluses and minuses? Obviously, there's 2 options for each point, right? Either a plus or a minus. So how many ways can I assign label to these points? 2 to the S, right? This S is 6. In how many ways can I make pluses and minuses out of these points? 2 to the 6, right? 64 possibilities. Hands up who's with me. So I have a bunch of family of classifiers. I didn't decide exactly which classifier, but I know it's all circles, for example, or lines, or rectangles, or whatever I want. I have a fixed set of points, but not fixed labels. There's all these possible ways to make those points into plus and minus. And I'm asking the following question. Is there 100% correct classifier F in the given class, like circles, for any labeling out of the 2 to the S? So what do I mean? Let's do some examples. Suppose F is a line, and I have 3 points. Size of S is 3. What am I asking here? This question becomes what? Is there the case that any labeling you choose, which means what? No. Any way you assign plus and minuses, is there a line that differentiates the plus from the minuses? 100% correct classifier means you have to separate the pluses from the minuses. So this is a line with pluses either side. Like I can not just pick the line, but I can pick which side is the plus and which side is the minus. Because there's some other lines that says the right side must be a plus. Right? That's a more restrictive classifier. Is that true in here? No matter how I pick plus and minuses, is there a line that does the job? So I can pick this plus, these 2 minuses. Can I separate them? 100% classifier means 100% separation. Plus versus minus. Okay? How about I choose those 2 pluses and the other minus? Is there a line that can separate this? Okay, so I want the maximum S for which is that possible. So I'm interested in the maximum number of points. The points are fixed, their labels are not. So I can pick the points by hand, but it has to work for any plus and minus assignments. So suppose I pick 4 points. So S equal 4 here. Here are 4 points. Is it true that no matter how I put the plus and minus, a line can separate them?
No?
Again, I can choose the points. So I can choose the points, but it has to work for any plus and minus.
No, 1/3 plus, 2nd first minus, and there's not a line.
So if this one is a,
1/3 first, 3rd plus,
this,
plus, minus, plus, minus.
can you separate those in here?
Oh, there's not a line separating those.
No. Okay, how about if I choose them like this? Can I separate any plus and minus assignment?
No, go plus minus, plus minus.
How about like this in a line? Separate means I don't include the degenerative case when the line passes through them and I'm saying I'm hoping for the, no. It has to separate them as not touching them.
No.
So the question of finding maximum S, what's the maximum S for a line then? 3. So the max S for lines. Lines is the class. The class that I'm talking there, like what kind of classifiers are you using for this is all the lines. You can pick any line you want, obviously. And you can pick the points. Just the line has to work for any assignment of plus and minuses to them. So this is 3. This is the VC dimension. So I have a classifier F, in this case of lines. The VC dimension is this what's the maximum number of points that you can pick in such a way that for any assignment of the 2 to the s, there's always 2 to the s plus and minus assignments. No matter how you pick, say, if you pick 10 points, there will be 1,024 possible assignments and plus and minuses. There's got to be a classifier in that class that does the job 100% correct. Okay? And if this is true, it's called shattering. If I say a classifier, a line can shatter 3 points. That means no matter how you assign the plus and minuses, there is a line that separates them correctly. But it cannot shatter 4 points. Because you can see anywhere you pick 4 points, there is some plus and minus assignment just breaks it. How about we move to the lines from the 2D line into 3D line? So 3D line is called what? Hyperplane, right? So I have this in 3D. How many points can I shatter? That is, we pick a number of points and say, this is a 3D space here, that was a 2D space. In 3D space, how many, no matter how you assign them, plus and minuses, so
And you can shatter a tetrahedron.
So this is a pyramid, right? This is the points. Right? Tetrahedron. I want to say, no matter how you assign the plus and minuses here, you can shadow them with a plane. Is that true or not?
Yeah.
If I say these two are pluses, the plane will come this way, we'll leave the other points in the back. If I say those two are pluses, it will come this way. If I say 3 are pluses, that's a face, I'm cutting that other point out. I can say s equal 4 works. How about s equal 5? I add a point here. Right? Can I shadow 5 points with the plane? Hyperplane. That means what? How many possible assignments of labels are here? Can any one of those be correctly separated by a plane? Who was good at geometry, 3D geometry, way back? And guess what my next question will be once you guys figure out this one?
6.
How about in D-dimension? D-dimension, I drew a hyperplane. That's for the people who like more math. Same question if I have D dimensions, like in data, right? In data, I don't have 3 dimensions, I have 54 dimensions. How many points can I shatter in D dimensions? That is maximum number of points that you can pick by hand, such that no matter what assignment you do on them, you can always find a plane that does the job. Let's leave that for a question. I say this doesn't work. So it's 4 in here, because for 5 you can do it. How about for circles? Is my classified as a circle now? How many points can I shadow with a circle?
Definitely 3.
Can I do any 3 points, no matter how I do the plus and minuses? You sure?
No.
I don't know. Let's see. So I pick 3 points,
Do a triangle.
and what if this is a plus and this is a plus and this is a minus? Can I get that circle to take those pluses out?
Do you have to be able to shatter any possible set of 3 points?
Very
Or is
good
it just
question. So
one
what did I say?
particular- You said
I can
by
pick
hand.
the points by hand. I don't have to shatter any set of 3 points. I have to shatter some set of 3 points. This is a controversial definition. Some people many years ago argue that it should be any set of points. That's a very strong definition of Vcdim. But the regular one is some set of points. So now if I pick 3 points in an equilateral triangle, can I shatter them with a circle, no matter how I do the assignment? What if I have circles of a fixed radius?
Still, yes.
Still yes, because I can move the points in and out, like I scale the points down to fit into the radius. Again, I can pick the points. How about 4 points? Can I shadow 4 points with a circle?
I don't think so.
Again, I can pick the points. Remember that.
What if you put one in the middle?
Like that?
No, 4 points, so like projection of the tetrahedron.
Like that? Let's do this. Can I shadow these 4 points with a circle?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, if I mentioned this, there is for every class of these classified discriminant classifiers, there is the loose version where you can choose the minus or plus inside or outside, and there is a strict version that says the inside of a circle is the plus. That has to be the plus. In a strict version, can I shadow those 4 points if I tell you that inside of the circle must be the plus? Is there a way to assign labels so that no circle will do the job?
Minus in the middle, plus on the
If minus is here, plus, plus, plus.
But just sort of pointing at points on a board doesn't feel like a proof to me. Like even for line, it's like we just showed that some configurations of 4 don't work.
No. Some configurations of okay, yeah, I see what you mean. So we show some configuration of 3 works, everybody buys that. What he's not buying in the 4 argument that says any 4 points for a line cannot be shadowed. We need a
I
proof.
think it's true. I just think it's not proof.
I think it's true also. Yeah, you're right, we need a proof. We're not gonna do the proof here, but we expect highly talented mathematicians to figure that out, right? Like always. So his question is very good. Why is it that 4 points can never be shadowed by a line? No 4 points, no matter how you pick them. But everybody follows me here? If I force the inside of a circle to be the plus, I cannot shadow these points. How about if I don't force? I can say you pick the circle and you pick the sides. Can I shadow 4 points?
Yes.
If the
Can
circle
I-
in the middle, yes.
Yeah. Can I pick one circle to differentiate any sort of sides versus the other side? How many? Right. So 4 points works. How about 5? Can I shadow 5 points with a circle? That's the kind of question is in there in the homework. How about 2 circles? If I am allowed to have 2 circles, how many points can I shadow? So you can choose the side, but it has to be the same side. If you choose the plus inside, is the plus inside each circle, and the minus outside. So my classifier is now 2 circles. The inside is plus, outside is minus, or the other way. How many points can I shadow with that? That's what you have to do. It's pure geometry. What's my point here? What is this Vcdim dimension? What is it measuring? So I can do it for circle, for lines. I can also do it for decision trees, perhaps. Right? I can ask if I have a one-split decision tree, the kinds of that you implement for other decision stumps, one-level decision tree. How many points can you shadow with that? Meaning, no matter how you do the assignments, there is some one-level decision stump that will do the job. Where is this going? This is the Vcdim dimension is measuring something for that class of classifiers. That if you look at all the lines, the Vcdim dimension is 3, right? We say for lines. For hyperplanes, it's 4. For circles, it's 4. For 2 circles, maybe it's 7. For a decision tree with 7 leaves, maybe 19. What is it measuring?
Open fitting, doesn't anything to do with open fitting.
It's related, but it's measuring something else.
It's the number of data points where that algorithm could get 100% accuracy regardless of the labels.
Right, but it's not a practical notion in that sense. No algorithm will get 100% accuracy in practice, right? We're not gonna have, we use lines all the time, right? And we classify way more points than how many points the Vcdim dimension is, 4 or 5 or 6, right? We're talking about classifying thousands of points. But also the points don't have this idiotic pattern of assigned random pluses and minuses, right? Like no data set will have random assignments. I mean, maybe some outliers there, but we can expect there's a pattern of labeling assignments. So this is a theoretical notion that's designed to measure something about that classifier. Yes.
Can we can we like think of it as like the order of the function that would take, like for example, so in the 4-point example that you gave, right? So you can't do that with a straight line, but you can do that with a curve. So can we think of it that way?
Yes. So I think that's a good idea. So he's saying lines can do this because lines are limited at VC dimension, what do you say, 3. But if you allow me to do a certain curve, let's not just do any curve, because any curve, I can't control that. Let's say quadratic curves, right? Or cubic curves. If you allow me to do a curve here, I can separate those points. So this curve, say it's a sinusoidal curve or cubic curve or something, right? Nice mathematical curve. This has the VC dimension, perhaps 4, because it can shatter. If I allow the 2 hill like a sinusoidal curve here, right, I can shatter 4 points that way. So what's the difference between these curves and the one has the VC dimension 4 and one has dimension 3? What is they actually measuring? It measures some notion of capacity or complexity. So, is it good to have a high VC dimension classifier? There's good and bad things. Why would I want the high VC dimension classifier? To be able to solve complex problems, right? Why would I would not want a high VC dimension classifier? Overfits very easily, right? So it's a balance of VC dimension versus how much data I have. This is presumably a good classifier if I have a lot of points that follow this pattern. How about decision trees? What's going to happen with the VC dimension when I make the tree deeper? Definitely going to increase massively the VC dimension from a stump to leaves, right? So I want a VC dimension that kind of fits my problem. If it's too low, I can't really learn the pattern that's in the data, right? Because I need a complexity of the classifier to be able to figure out the actual pattern. But if it's too high, then I'm just going to overfeed a training set very easily, and I'm not going to be able to make use of that in a generalizable way for the testing set. That's the story of VC dimension. Again, what you have in the homework is just a geometrical exercise, how many points you can shatter. But there is a theorem by a very famous Russian guy, roughly 1990, Batnik. This guy put the basis of how theory works in machine learning for risk minimization and pack learning. He came after pack learning. He wrote the following set of theorems, which I'm not going to do in details. He said the test error of a classifier, supervised learning, it's smaller than the train error plus some function of the VC dimension. So that's not a good way to approach machine learning theoretically today. We're much better than that today. But back then, nobody had any theory. Everybody was running algorithms, and mathematicians were like, how do you know it's going to work? I'm not running on data, because we're computer scientists, it works. And they say, what if your data's biased or sample or not big enough? How do you deal with that? And this guy, which is a mathematician, very famous, he said, look, if you can quantify the VC dimension of the classifier, which you might do manually with this or with some more geometry, you get better at it, then you can bound the testing error with the training error. So if your training error is 0%, like with boosting, you get training error to work perfectly. Then you can bound the testing error by saying how much VC dimension of this function I have. And then that's going to tell you that your testing error cannot be more than something. It's kind of a guarantee here, right? If you do a good training error, meaning low, and the VC dimension is not very high, there is a mathematical monster here. Then it somehow puts a bound on your testing error with some data assumptions. I mean, of course, if this data doesn't follow the same pattern, you're not going to get anything. But those are kind of the first initial theoretical results that kind of relate the complexity of the classifier with the data and with the training ability, because the better you train, the better you're going to be. That's why this was important for a while.
Just to confirm, the VC dimension would be a function of the dimensionality of the data, right? So it would change with more dimensions in our sample.
Right, but that's not given by the definition. That's kind of a corollary. You can see that no matter what class you pick, lines, circles, decision trees, whatever, the more data has more dimensions, the more VC dimension is going to increase. In fact, a lot of these theorems have two quantities in them, a VC dimension and a dimensionality of the data. So there is a D somewhere in here that says the more you have more features, the more this equation is more loose. I'm not interested in you guys knowing that equation or making the proofs. What I'm interested is in remember what the VC dimension is. It's a measure of complexity that relates the training error with the testing error. And as a homework, we have this geometrical exercise for some classes. How many points can you shadow with them? All right. So we're playing catch up today. ECOC. This is as opposed to so VC dimension, it's very interesting and complex theoretically. You're going to see that even for some very simple classifiers like two circles, it's kind of hard to figure out how many points can you shadow. You're going to play a lot on a piece of paper with points and say, okay, can I separate those 6 points or not? But has little value in practice. This theorem, which was a big deal in theory, everybody ignored it in practice because it's not, the bound for boosting will be like if your training error is 0 and you use the VC dimension, you get a testing error of at most 40%. And people who do machine learning says, yeah, I know it's at least the error, it's at most 40% because I get 96% accuracy. So of course it's lower than, it's at least 60%, right? That may be interesting in theory, but it doesn't help me because I'm way higher than that, right? So in practice, this is a loose bound. It doesn't help anybody who does machine learning in production. But it was a way back then to think about this. So what I'm going to show you now is the total opposite. Has very little theory, but an extreme impact into how to deal with complex problems. So in ECOC, we say we have a multi-class or even a multi-label data set. So multi-class means Y, the label, belongs to a bunch of red, blue, green, right? It's one of the Y1, Y2, up to YK, right? When we have multiple possible labels, but only one applies per data point. Multi-label, Y is a subset. So a data point in a multi-label problem can have multiple labels. You know, can have a color and a tag and a source. So you look at the article from news. It has multiple tags, right? It's not just one tag, it's multiple tags. So binary, of course, is black or white. Multi-class, it's one out of a set of 20 or 50. And multi-label is a subset out of a set. So people have thought for a long time, how do I deal with this problem? I know how to train very accurately binary classifiers, regressions, decision trees, so on and so forth. But this seems like a hard problem. I could do it one by one. So in either case, I can train a classifier for Y1 versus not Y1, binary. Y2 versus not Y2, binary. And then in the multi-class, when I have to pick a label, what do? If I have scores, I do argmax. Or there is an even better way than argmax. There is a
One versus all.
right, one versus all, or there's a sigmoid that works for multi-class, right? How is it called? Softmax, right? In a multi-label, I'll just predict all of them that are bigger than a threshold, right? Say everything that ends up positive, I'm going to predict that subset. So people have thought, that has problems. Dependency among labels, being inaccurate for some labels, inaccurate for ours. And the biggest problem of all, which is kind of hard to explain, but it's what's happening in data, is the ability to discriminate, especially for all the classifiers that we study except the generative algorithms. The discriminators, decision trees, neural networks, regressions. They discriminate well if you tell them what to discriminate. If you tell regression, make a difference between spam versus not spam. In fact, you're telling it, find me the difference. For decision tree, you tell it the same thing. Find me the differences between that and that. It does, right? It finds those differences, splits or high coefficients, whatever it is. In here, if I train binary classifiers, I'm not differentiating between Y1 and Y2. I'm differentiating between Y1 and not Y1, and Y2 and not Y2. Imagine now that Y1 and Y2 are very similar labels. One is a cat and one is a dog in an image. I see an animal, right? I'm running a classifier, cat versus not cat. It's going to be 80% there's a cat because there is some small animal with 4 legs. And there is another classifier, dog versus not dog. There is a small animal with 4 legs, so 80% chance there is a dog. So now I have 80% chance there's a cat, 80% chance there's a dog, but not a discriminator between them explicitly. I didn't ask, find me the difference between cats and dogs. Therefore, if I use my naive algorithm that says just predict whatever comes, I may predict in this case both cat and dog. And in this case, I may be easily predicting the wrong one. This is something I want to give you as an intuition. It's definitely a PhD thesis kind of sort of level in here. Like this is much, the intuition is what I just said, but the back end of all this story with dependencies between labels is very complex. That's an active area of study in machine learning. If you go to Premier Machine Learning, ICML, or NIPS, there'll be an entire section of how to deal with dependencies between labels in there. So that's a very research active area, people writing PhD thesis about it. It's complicated. So here's some Schwarzman solution to this. How about I look at my Y classes? Depending on the setup, I'm going to figure out what those are. Right. And I'm encoding those classes. So class encoding on, say, 20 dimensions. So I have encoding 1, encoding 2, encoding 3, up to encoding 20. Again, I'm not looking at data here. There's no pictures or emails or patients, nothing like that. What I'm looking is at the labels. So in a multi-class setup, those will be Y1, Y2, YK, right? Multi-class. And in a multi-label setup, I may have subsets. I may have Y1, Y3, and Y7. That's a possible subset of labels. Another one is Y1 and Y2, maybe. Another one is Y2 and Y3. I don't know. Again, what this does is looking at the labels. We may need domain expertise, but we're not looking at data features in here. There's no excess. Okay? I'm generating an encoding which is binary. So E1 will be, some of them will be 0, some of them will be 1. For example, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1. This E2 is 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1. 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Okay, and encoding. And the last one might be 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0. Okay? I'm not telling you how this encoding is produced. I'm telling you it's produced, and before I run machine learning algorithms, I already have the encoding. I'm encoding every single label or sets of labels, whatever is of interest to me, into a binary representation similar to what word vectors do for people who are familiar with word vectors. But that's not binary. Now, that's part number one. Part number two is train classifiers for each EI. In other words, if I look at the data now for each E1, it's a binary data set, right? I take a data point, it has one of the labels, and it maps into 0, 1. I take E2, one of the whatever label that my data point has, it maps into 0, 1. Every one of these columns, it's a replacement of the labels with a binary 0, 1 encoding. Right? So I can take my training set and say, replace the Y2 in this problem, replace it with 0 in 0, maybe this is a 1, so on and so forth. So I train a classifier separately for each one of these EIs. And then part number 3, I use a heuristic to map. So for a test point, it's going to give me some E1 up to E20, some predictions, right? If I run on my classifier on test point, I'm going to get prediction 1, prediction 2, up to prediction 20. I have to map prediction 1, 2, 3, all these 20 back into the label. So in other words, I have those classifiers. I train 20 of them. I get a new patient, a new image. I run my classifiers. Each one of them predicts a value, right? 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1. I look at these predictions and I look at the table and I say, what is the label that corresponds to this set of predictions? If it's exactly one of these rows, it's easy, right? If I get exactly 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, then I say, that's got to be Y4 here. But what if it's neither one of these things? I run my predictions and I get 1, 0, 1. It's close to one of them, but it's not identical to either one in my table. This is like a dictionary table of mapping of everybody. What do I do then? Closest. And I'm back to the encoding theory. In encoding decoding theory, those code words, there is a theory of saying what kind of code words are good so you can decipher, you can decrypt data when you have errors. The farther apart those code words are, that's called the distance between them. The easiest is to map it into something, right? If two code words are very close, you get something close there, you don't know which one it is. But the farthest away they are from each other, the easier is when you get an error to say predict the closest one bit away. That's how decoding works, even for memory RAMs in computers, is the closest correction. Or I can train a meta classifier. Right, that says, okay, how do you go back from E1, from P1 predictions, P2, P20 into a label? This, I can train it as a classifier. It doesn't work because it's back a multi-class or multi-label problem. These are my features now. How do you predict a class or a multi-label class, right? That would still be a hard problem. What they train is a verifier. They take the predictions, P1 to P20, and some particular assignment, Y1, Y2, Y7, and they map it into either true or false. So if you know, you took a complexity class, you do these verifications for hypotheses. You don't actually find, like in 3SAT, whether it's trying to find a solution, but you can verify a solution. So we train a verifier, that's just like a classifier, that takes the predictions P1, P2, whatever I have for this binary stuff. It takes an encoding of the label, what it is, and it only predicts true or false. So it's a binary classifier in terms of supervised classification. And this has enormous good properties that I can talk about next time. So depending on how we design this coding thing here, we can get many advantages. One advantage could be separate the codes to these. Another advantage is independent between the classifiers. Even though the labels are not independent, E1, E2, and E3, E20 might be far more independent than the labels. So there's a naive mechanism to do this intelligently, but most people, if you have enough classes, most people use random E1 to E20. If I use random encoding, random columns, and a verifier, it's okay if some columns are totally meaningless, because my verifier, which is a machine learning algorithm, will choose to ignore those columns, right? Everything that happens to be a random thing, the classifier will not use it. Right? So you have an exercise that asks you to take the data and set up ECOC this way. A bunch of columns, train a binary classifier for each column, and then do a wrapper that takes those predictions back into the labels. Okay, I'm a little over, so I can't talk about ranking today, but we'll do it next time. Are we talking tomorrow about English math? Yeah, I think everybody.